Welcome to PTI BetterGradesFast.com multimedia tutorials. This creative writing session will be on story writing. When you are considering a story that you have to write, you need to have a specific plan before you begin the actual writing. When you are planning, you need to consider these 4 main points before you actually begin to write your composition. The first thing you need to consider is the setting of your story. The setting of your story is usually where your story takes place, and this includes a good description of the place in which your story is located. So, if your story is about a haunted house, your setting would be the house itself, but it goes further in your description of the house, meaning perhaps you could mention that there are many cobwebs. Perhaps you could mention that the doors creak. All these things add to your setting. Remember, when determining a setting for your story, you need to think about the reader, meaning the person who will be reading your story after. They need to be able to picture the setting that you have written about. So, again, if you are writing about a haunted house, the person reading it, perhaps your teacher, should be able to picture the haunted house in his or her mind because you have written a good setting. Next, you have to think about your plot. Your plot is the basic movement of your story, meaning every event that is going to happen in your story will be considered your plot. So, who does what, when, etc. This is your plot, otherwise known as your storyline. You need to think about your plot before writing, because if you do not plan your plot before you actually begin to write, then if you write and just go with what you think, you often stray very far from the topic. Also, you may repeat things that you have already mentioned. But if you plan your plot beforehand, you will be able to avoid these common mistakes. Another important part of planning your story is considering your characters. The characters in your story are the person or persons, or perhaps even animals that you have decided to include in your story. Remember that your story does not always have to be about you alone. Your story could be based on a neighbor, on a friend, on a relative, on a classmate. You do not even have to appear in your own story, meaning you do not have to be a character in your own story if you choose not to be. When describing your characters, do not only think of their names or if they are boys or girls or old or young. Think of different personality traits that you want to give them in your story. For example, if you want to describe someone in your class who is a bully and his name is Jimmy, show the reader why you say that this person is a bully. So, describe different events that would make him be considered a bully. Also, if you are saying that someone is a good person, a kind person, or a gentle person, make sure that you explain these things to your reader by showing them examples of what makes this character a good person. Always ensure that your characters are consistent. This means that your reader will not be easily confused. If you change your characters constantly and you change their characteristics, then as a reader, you will not be able to follow. if you keep a specific character or characters along the same personality traits, then it will be easy to follow them at all times. Finally, you need to determine the theme of your story. The theme of your story is usually the general idea that your story is about. Your theme is usually an abstract noun. So, when you think of the word love, for example, that can be a theme of a story, which shows how a mother helped a son. The theme betrayal could show a story where someone trusted his cousin with his money and his cousin ended up stealing it. Themes, again, are abstract nouns. So, once you can decide a specific abstract noun that talks about the main idea in your whole story, then you have considered a relevant theme. Remember, these 4 main considerations for your story writing must be done before you actually begin to write. This means that you must determine your setting, which is the place or a description of it. You must also determine your plot, which is the actual storyline. You must determine your characters, who are the people participating in your story. And finally, you must determine your theme, which is the main idea, an abstract noun, that encompasses your whole story. Once you have determined these 4 things before writing, when you begin to actually write your short story, it will be much easier. Also, your reader will be able to see that you have properly planned and determined what you wanted to say beforehand. So your short story will end up being a lot more organized. Remember, when you are rereading or proofreading your story, you are checking to see if the reader will be able to get the same images in their mind as you would have gotten. Once you have established these 4 different groups of considerations for your story, you can be assured that any short story that you write will be well done. Thank you for choosing PTI BetterGradesFast.com.